just because I accidentally broke the clay figurine that Bai Guan gave him, my fiancé, who had been engaged to me for many years, abandoned me in the countryside to fend for myself. A year later, Simon finally remembered me and brought Sophie to take me back. Sophie asked, "It's been so long since we came to pick up Cynthia. Do you think she might be angry?" Simon scoffed, "A year is just right. If it were shorter, she wouldn't remember it deeply." Then a sneer appeared on his face. "Cynthia is just a lowly person, she won't learn unless she's taught a lesson." Just when everyone thought I would cry and cling to Simon upon his return, I simply smiled calmly and said, "Excuse me, who are you?" A flash of nervousness and unease crossed Simon's eyes. "Cynthia, have you forgotten? I am your fiancé." "If you were my fiancé, why did you leave me in this rural town?" I asked, half reclining on a lounge chair in the yard, my face uncontrollably pale. Half asleep, I didn't notice when the yard outside filled with cars. After a flurry of hurried footsteps, there were whispers. "Simon, look at this poor environment. Cynthia must have had a hard time this past year. It's all my fault. We should have come to pick up Cynthia earlier. Now, I just hope she doesn't hold a grudge against me." "Sophie, I think you're just too kind-hearted. Sending Cynthia here was to punish her, not to give her a vacation. Why would she need such a good environment? Moreover, if it weren't for you pleading for her and always thinking about bringing her back, I would have left her here for 3 years." Listening to their conversation, I didn't need to guess, I instantly knew who had come. A year ago, just because I accidentally broke the clay doll Sophie made for Simon, he heartlessly left me in the old house in the countryside. I remember it was late at night. The old house, long uninhabited, seemed eerie and terrifying. I cried and clung to Simon's clothes, begging him not to leave me alone there. But because of a single sentence from Sophie, he coldly shook off my hand, his eyes full of disgust. "Cynthia, this is your punishment. If you don't learn your lesson, you'll never know your mistake." That night, I huddled in the dark old house, enduring the hardest night. Sophie's words kept echoing in my mind, "Simon, I put a lot of effort into making that clay doll for you." So, I, his fiancé of nearly 7 years, was worth less to him than a clay doll casually made by Sophie. Recalling the events of a year ago, immense unwillingness surged and roared in my heart. Soon, the sunlight in front of me was blocked by a shadow. Simon's cold and heartless voice rang in my ears again, "Cynthia, it's time to get up. Since you've behaved well this year, I've come to take you home." I slowly opened my eyes, frowned, and stared at Simon for a long time before questioning him. "Home? What home? And who are you, sir?" Simon frowned, looking deeply at me, a flash of nervousness in his eyes, and his voice unconsciously raised a few degrees. "Cynthia, what nonsense are you talking about? I am Simon, your fiancé." I sneered twice. "If you were my fiancé, why did you leave me in this rural town?" Simon was instantly speechless. Finally, with a dark face and a heavy voice, he said impatiently, "Cynthia, stop playing dumb. I'm here to take you back now." Hearing him say he would take me home again, a wave of desolation rose in my heart. So, he still remembered that he was my fiancé. But he left me in this old house in the mountain village for a year without caring. He spent all his time with Sophie, and anyone who didn't know would think they were a couple. In the past, I had argued and quarreled with him over this, but Simon still did as he pleased, disregarding my feelings. The day I accidentally broke the clay doll Sophie made for him, I had a big fight with Simon. We had agreed to go get our marriage certificate, but he left me alone at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Just because Sophie called and said she wanted to eat xiaolongbao from Nanching, he couldn't wait to leave. He didn't even have time to get the certificate. I waited for him at the Civil Affairs Bureau until the staff drove me out. Dazed and confused, I went home to see him and Sophie intimately feeding each other xiaolongbao. At first, he looked at me with some guilt. But then Sophie said lightly, "The Civil Affairs Bureau is right there, it won't run away." "Cynthia, are you so anxious because you've done something guilty?" Simon immediately seemed to find a reason. He looked at me righteously, every word venting his dissatisfaction with me. "Cynthia, you're not young anymore, you should know that some things can't be rushed. You should learn to be sensible. I'm very busy, unlike you who has nothing to do every day." At that time, I sarcastically replied, "Being busy means buying Xylonbeo for Sophie?" This sentence instantly ignited Simon's anger. Before I could react, his hand slapped my face. With a loud smack, my right cheek burned with pain. I couldn't help but step back a few steps, my left hand hitting the shoe cabinet, knocking over Sophie's clay doll, which fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. I did try to explain. But with my swollen face, no matter how much I explained, Simon didn't believe me. He always thought I did it on purpose, just to retaliate for his slap. Thinking about it now, it's simply a joke. Clearly, I was the one hurt, but in his eyes, I was the perpetrator. I calmly leaned back on the lounge chair, not responding to Simon's words. He rushed over in one stride, grabbed my arm tightly, his face ferocious. "Cynthia, I'm talking to you, do you hear me?" Even Sophie, crying beside him, said, "Simon, I think Cynthia must hate me, so she's pretending not to recognize us." "Cynthia, I'm apologizing to you here, isn't that enough?" As she spoke, she prepared to bow an apology. But the next second, Simon's eyes turned red with anger, and he quickly reached out to support Sophie, preventing her from bending further. "Sophie, your waist injury hasn't healed yet, you mustn't hurt it again." Then he turned his head, his eyes glaring fiercely at me. He kept exerting force with his hand, as if he wanted to break my arm. "Cynthia, are you going to speak or not? Hurry up and explain to Sophie." But I remained unmoved, enduring the pain in my arm and even managing to let out a cold laugh. Sophie looked at me with resentment, her waist half bent. Seeing that I still didn't speak, she could only stay in that awkward position. Tears instantly streamed down her cheeks. "Simon, don't worry about me. Cynthia just holds a grudge against me. If I don't apologize, she won't go back. I've been taking care of you at the Zhao family without any status this past year, but I didn't expect Cynthia to see me as a villain." Hearing this, Simon felt extremely distressed. He looked at me with gritted teeth, his eyes fierce. Without any regard, he pulled me from the lounge chair to the ground. My back scraped against the ground as he dragged me a few steps, literally pulling me to Sophie's feet. "Cynthia, you are such a jealous woman. If it weren't for Sophie taking care of me this year, how could I be as healthy as I am now? Not only do you not appreciate it, but you even want to hold a grudge against her." I looked at Simon sarcastically. What a huge joke. He was the one who left me in the old house in the countryside, and now he blames me for not taking care of him this year. He and Sophie had a sweet year together, and he was so happy that he almost forgot about me, his fiancée. Now he remembers to blame me with this reason. On what grounds? In his eyes, no matter what I do, it's wrong. Simon saw my indignation. He grabbed my hand and threw it harshly to the ground. He looked at me in anger and embarrassment, but his eyes dodged a bit. "Cynthia, what kind of look is that?" With a thud, I finally couldn't help but groan in pain. My wrist hit a small stone on the ground, causing uncontrollable trembling from the pain. My back was also burning and stinging, with clothes torn and blood seeping out, sticking together. Seeing me trembling all over, my face contorted in pain, my already pale complexion became completely bloodless. At this moment, Simon finally came to his senses and hurriedly stepped forward to help me up. "Cynthia, what's wrong with you?" I didn't expect you to become so weak." Hearing his false concern, for a moment, I didn't feel sad but rather a faint sense of absurdity. Clearly, all this was caused by him, and now he's pretending to be deeply affectionate? Simon wanted to pick me up. "Cynthia, bear with it. I'll take you home right away and have a doctor check your body." But I suddenly shook off his hand, mustered all my strength, and slowly stood up from the ground. Leaning on the chair behind me, I held back the tears that had already filled my eyes and said resolutely, "No, I won't go back with you. My home is here. Now, please leave immediately, or I'll call the police." Simon was stunned for a moment by the cold expression on my face, showing a rare panic. He frowned and was about to speak when Sophie, behind him, preempted him. She looked at me, crying like a pear blossom in the rain. In a corner where only the two of us could see, she revealed a sinister expression. "Cynthia, I think you're just pretending to be so weak. You had plenty of strength when you pushed Simon away just now." As she spoke, she resorted to her old trick. After pulling Simon's arm, she put on a pitiful look. "I think Cynthia is just dissatisfied with me and wants to deliberately torment me. But it's okay. If my waist injury recurs, I'll have to trouble you to bathe and wipe my body every day again." Hearing these words and seeing Sophie's shy face, even though I knew she was deliberately provoking me, it still stirred up all my emotions. Simon quickly embraced her indulgently, gently supporting her waist with his hand. "Don't push yourself. If your waist injury recurs, you'll have to stay in bed again." At this moment, where was the violence in his eyes when he faced me? They were full of tenderness and affection for Sophie. Seeing this scene, even though I had decided to give up on Simon, my heart still felt a dense, twisting pain. Sophie glanced at me triumphantly and then weakly leaned into his embrace. "But if I don't apologize, what if Cynthia doesn't go home?" Simon looked up, and our eyes met in the air. Subconsciously, he distanced himself from Sophie again. Then he looked at me with disappointment, his eyes cold and heartless. "Cynthia, it's one thing to deceive me, but why do you have to torment Sophie?" But seeing my pale face and body covered in wounds, his voice softened involuntarily, suppressing his anger. "I'll ask you one last time, are you coming home with me or not?" Looking at Simon, who was extremely suppressing his anger, I suddenly spread my hands and smiled at him. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Simon. I've already told you, my home is here. You didn't come for a year, and not only did I get married, but I also had a child. How can I go back with you? Do you really think I would abandon my husband and child for you?" After saying that, I remembered that my husband and son were about to return. So, I turned and went into the house to prepare formula. At some point, Simon's eyes had turned red. Ignoring Sophie's shouts from behind, he followed me directly into the house. Angrily, he grabbed my hand and threw me onto the sofa, his face finally unable to contain the erupting anger. "Cynthia, how long are you going to play me? Talking about marriage and having a child? Even if you're messing around, there should be a limit. Do you believe I'll really leave you here and never care about you again?" I didn't make a sound. I painfully crawled on the sofa, my back had just hit the sofa, and the recently clotted wound split open again. My clothes were already stained red with blood. Simon's face showed a panicked and uneasy expression. He wanted to step forward but stopped himself. After a long silence, he carefully chose his words and spoke again. "Cynthia, you weren't such a petty person before. Why have you become like this now?" He shook his head, as if I had committed some grave mistake. "I know you don't like Sophie, even hate her, but you should know that during the year you were away, it was thanks to Sophie that I was taken care of. You don't need to have any complaints against Sophie. She and I are just pure friends. You are my fiancé, and we are the ones who will get married in the end." Enduring the severe pain in my body, I finally sat up straight on the sofa, feeling a sour and bitter taste in my heart. So, Simon had always known that I didn't like Sophie. Yet every time, he tortured and humiliated me for her sake. Perhaps he himself hadn't realized that every word he was saying now was defending his so-called friend Sophie. Quietly listening to his last sentence, the desolation in my heart engulfed me like the ocean. I finally couldn't help but laugh self-mockingly and said, "Believe it, how could I not believe it? Haven't I already been left here by you for a year? But Simon, Cynthia, am a selfish and petty person. Whoever treats me badly, I will remember it for a lifetime." As soon as I finished speaking, he couldn't hold back anymore and picked up the glass on the table, throwing it hard at the door behind me. "Cynthia, have you had enough?" Glass shards splashed all over me. There was also a scream from outside the door. "Who is it?" Simon turned his head impatiently. It was Sophie who came in. Simon, I saw you hadn't come out for so long and was afraid something had happened to you. His tightly furrowed brows instantly relaxed. But the air in the room suddenly seemed to freeze, becoming deathly silent. After a while, Sophie glanced at me with resentment, then said dejectedly, Simon, I'll go back first. Since Cynthia can't stand me, I'll pack my bags and leave the Zhao family when I get back. Finally, Simon's long-suppressed temper erupted like a volcano. Without regard for my weak body, he viciously grabbed my arm and dragged me outside. His sharp and strong fingers seemed to want to pierce deep into the flesh of my forearm. The pain made tears instantly well up in my eyes. I swung my hand and slapped him across the face. Simon was instantly stunned, looking at me in disbelief. Cynthia, you actually hit me? From childhood to adulthood, in his eyes, I had always been someone who took care of him. But this time I slapped him again without relieving my anger. Simon, are you awake now? I told you, I'm already married and have a child. My home is here. Please don't disturb my life. Upon hearing this, Simon sneered. How many times are you going to repeat this lie? Marriage and having a child? Who else besides me would marry you and have a child with you? Just then, the voices of my husband and child came from outside the door. Honey, I'm back. Seeing Lucas holding the child and pushing the door open, Simon's face showed a mix of shock and fear. His trembling lips asked me, Cynthia, who are they? Why do they call you wife? I ignored Simon. In a few steps, I went forward to take the child from Lucas's arms. The moment I held the child, the pain in my body seemed to disappear. But Lucas saw the wounds all over my body. His face immediately darkened, and he asked me in a chilling tone, Honey, why are there so many people at home, and are all these injuries on your body caused by them? As he spoke, Lucas's cold eyes looked towards Sophie and Simon. It was the first time I saw such an icy expression on his face. I met Lucas a year ago, on the night after Simon left me at the old house. I tried to walk back to the city but accidentally got lost in the mountains. The weather was uncooperative, and it started to rain heavily. I accidentally slipped and rolled down the mountain, hitting a tree and fainting. When I woke up, I was already lying in a small tent. Lucas was sitting in a corner of the tent, curled up, with all the blankets covering me. He was the one who saved me. He said he happened to be camping and exploring in the mountains and unexpectedly found me unconscious under a tree, so he rescued me. Later, I invited him back to the old house. Having someone with me reduced my fear, and I settled down peacefully in the old house. Lucas seemed to come to this mountainous area often for adventures, and every time he came, I would let him stay at the old house. Over time, as we interacted more, I gradually developed different feelings for him. I no longer thought about going back and learned to let go of my feelings for Simon. After 2 months of being together, during a mountain climb to watch the sunrise with Lucas, he proposed to me. After much thought, I agreed. We didn't have a grand wedding, and not many people knew about it. But I knew Lucas truly loved me. I felt his concerned gaze scanning my body, finally lingering on the bloody wound on my back. I smiled at him. All right, there are outsiders here, let's talk about this later. But as I brushed it off, Simon unwillingly rushed up. With red eyes and veins bulging on his forehead, he grabbed my hands and questioned me, Cynthia, tell me, who is he? And whose child is this? I had just frowned when Lucas pushed Simon away. He wasn't stupid, he had heard my story and naturally guessed who Simon was. Then, seeing the injuries on my body, he looked at him coldly and said in an unfriendly tone, Mr. Simon, right? I am Cynthia's husband, and this is our child. I wonder if Mr. Simon is clear enough now. Hearing Lucas say this, Simon naturally found it hard to accept. His face twisted into a grimace, his eyes wide with anger. Impossible, Cynthia is my fiancée. She only loves me, how could she marry you? But Lucas's simple sentence stunned Simon. Since you know Cynthia loves you so much, how did you treat her? How did he treat her? Simon seemed to become dazed. He remembered how he constantly belittled me for Sophie, even leaving me in this remote old house because of a clay doll. His mind felt as if it had been hit by a heavy hammer. Gritting his teeth, his eyes filled with thick bloodshot veins. This is between Cynthia and me, what does it have to do with you? I will naturally give Cynthia an explanation for what happened between us. Lucas sneered and immediately wrapped his arm around my waist. Now I am Cynthia's husband, her affairs are my affairs. I wasn't here before, but I won't let go of what you did to Cynthia today. Lucas's palm occasionally rubbed my waist restlessly, making me feel ticklish, and I gave him a coquettish glare. This scene instantly stimulated Simon. His chest heaved up and down, looking at me angrily. At this moment, Sophie emerged from behind and grabbed Simon, the excitement in her eyes impossible to hide. Simon, since Cynthia has already married and had a child, let's not disturb her life anymore. Unfortunately, it would have been better if she hadn't said that. As soon as she did, Simon went mad like a bull, shook off Sophie's hand, and charged at Lucas, punching him. I was pushed aside and stood not far away. The two began to wrestle. Sophie anxiously tried to them but couldn't stop them. So, she could only ask me to them. Cynthia, hurry up and stop them, what if they get hurt? I didn't make a sound. I calmly held the child, lowering my head to play with him. Simon, who sat in the office all day, was no match for Lucas, who often climbed mountains and exercised. In a few moves, he was beaten to the ground by Lucas. It wasn't until I saw Simon trembling and unable to stand steadily that I spoke casually. I've already said it before, and now the facts are in front of you. Simon, please don't come again in the future. I don't want my life to be disturbed by you. After saying that, I carried the child back to the bedroom. Simon watched my departing figure with blank eyes, unwilling but helpless. Finally, he was driven out by Lucas. Late at night, I lay on the bed in the bedroom. Lucas used alcohol to clean the wound on my back. The man who had just shown his prowess during the day was now tearfully wiping my wound. It's all my fault for insisting on taking our son out to play. If I had been at home, you wouldn't have been injured, my wife. I glanced at him speechlessly. I was the one who asked you to take our son out, so you mean to blame me? Lucas immediately put on a wronged face. That's not it, Cynthia, you can't wrong me like that. I'm just heartbroken for you. Your previous injuries hadn't healed yet, and now because of that Simon, you're injured all over again. In that heavy rain a year ago, when I rolled down the mountain, I injured my body, and it never fully healed. Later, when I was pregnant, although Lucas took care of me every day, I still coughed and wheezed for more than half a year. 3 months ago, I was hospitalized due to a high fever. Finally, at a little over 8 months, our son was born prematurely. I almost didn't make it off the operating table safely. Thinking of these things, I turned around and smiled, wiping away the tears from Lucas's eyes. Then, holding our son, I said to him, we haven't gone camping for a long time. How about we go camping in the back mountain tomorrow? Lucas was a bit hesitant, but in the end, he couldn't resist me. Early the next morning, Lucas prepared a lot of equipment and carried a large backpack. I carried our son and went out. Unexpectedly, as soon as we stepped out, a familiar voice came from behind. Simon was sitting on the steps outside the yard. When he saw me, he quickly patted the dust off his body, stood up, and walked towards me. I frowned, showing some impatience. Looking at Simon's appearance, it was clear he had been waiting outside all night. His hair was messy from the wind, and there were bloodshot veins in the corners of his eyes. His coat was damp with dew, mostly wet. I made it very clear yesterday. I don't know what else you want from me? Simon shook his head with a bitter smile. His eyes looked at me affectionately. Cynthia, we have an engagement. No matter what happens, we should discuss it properly. You don't need to do this with an outsider to anger me. At this point, he paused for a moment before continuing, but I admit that I was indeed angered by you. Cynthia, come home with me, and I will treat you well in the future. Hearing this, I couldn't help but sneer and mock him, using this to anger you? Simon, do you think the whole world has to revolve around you? Do you really think that no one else would want to marry me except you? This sentence made Simon's face turn extremely ugly, and he opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. Since he had already put his face in front of me, I didn't let him off. I have a husband and a child now. What do I need you for? To make me angry every day? Or to make me watch you and Sophie being ambiguous every day? Simon pursed his lips, his face pale. His heart shook, and he looked at me in disbelief, his eyes instantly turning red. Cynthia, believe me, Sophie and I are really just ordinary friends. Moreover, I thought about it all night and figured it out. Even if you have a child, it doesn't matter. I will treat him as my own. If you still don't believe me, I'll go to the hospital for a vasectomy, and in the future, we'll treat this child as our only treasure. Immediately, I looked at Simon as if he were a madman. I really didn't expect him to say such crazy things. But the next second, Lucas pushed him away. My son has his biological father, he doesn't need a second fake father. And stop thinking about my wife all day, or I'll make you lie in bed for half a month. Seeing Lucas's domineering protection of his wife, I quietly smiled. Simon's face was ashen, standing there stiffly. Lucas and I didn't pay him any more attention and turned to go camping in the back mountain. When we arrived at the back mountain, the son in my arms seemed to know we were going on a trip and kept babbling excitedly. Soon, the sky darkened. Lucas found a camping spot and set up the tent. At night, it started to drizzle. Lucas and I were sleeping soundly in the tent when suddenly there were shouts from outside. Soon, the voice became clearer. Almost without needing to identify it, I knew it was Simon who had come. I asked Lucas to stay in the tent with the child and went out with an umbrella. Simon, can you stop pestering me? I've already hidden in the mountains, and you still won't let me go? He was wearing a raincoat and holding a flashlight. When he saw me, his face showed uncontrollable joy. But after hearing my words, he stammered and couldn't say a word for a long time. Finally, with drooping shoulders, he said pitifully, Cynthia, I'm just afraid something might happen to you. It's very unsafe in the mountains at night. And this rain is getting heavier, there are often mudslides and landslides in the mountains, it's very dangerous. Let's go back, okay? For a moment, I didn't know how to describe the feeling in my heart. The concern I never imagined before now appeared absurdly. Simon, now you know to care about me? But what about a year ago? A year ago, I cried and begged, holding your hand, unwilling to let go, begging you to take me away from here. What did you say? Hearing my question, fear instantly spread from Simon's eyes. A startling thunderclap in the sky illuminated his bloodless face. Since he didn't dare to answer, I said it for him. You didn't hesitate to shake off my hand and said I deserved it. Because of a clay doll, you left me in the old house for a year without caring. Now you say you care about me? You probably care whether I'm dead or not. I questioned him hysterically, venting all the grievances I had held in my heart for the past year. After a long time, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. When I opened my eyes again, there was no trace of emotion in my gaze towards him. Now I have my own family, a husband who cares for me, and a child who accompanies me. I won't be afraid of the dark anymore. Simon, you are no longer important to me. This last sentence was like a knife, piercing deeply into his heart. His pupils suddenly contracted, and the flashlight in his hand fell powerlessly to the ground. He cried out in a heart-wrenching roar. Impossible, Cynthia, we were childhood sweethearts. In your heart, I will always be the most important person. I know you must still be angry. Angry that I didn't come to see you this year and that I was too close to Sophie, right? When I go back, I'll immediately drive her away, okay? Saying this, Simon rushed up to hold my hand. But after I dodged, he seemed to crumble, even the light in his eyes dimmed. Before I could speak, Sophie, who had appeared from somewhere, came up crying and clinging to Simon. Looking anxious and panicked, she said to him, Simon, how can you do this? You've already seen my body, and you still want to drive me away? Hearing this, Simon's face immediately turned red with anger. In a rage, he slapped Sophie to the ground and pointed at her, cursing, "What nonsense are you talking about? I have a fiancé, can't you have some sense of boundaries as a woman? And I've already said that you were just a nanny taking care of me in place of Cynthia. A nanny like you dreams of marrying into the Zhao family?" After being scolded by Simon like this, Sophie's face changed unpredictably, her emotions fluctuated violently, and her chest heaved constantly. Finally, she laughed maniacally and pointed at Simon, saying, "Boundaries? Simon, your sense of boundaries is bathing and wiping my body? If it weren't for my period that day, you probably would have climbed into my bed, right? Now you're pretending to be a gentleman and talking about boundaries with me? Do you deserve it? Have you forgotten how you tortured Cynthia because of me a year ago? Now that you see Cynthia is married, you regret it?" Being pointed at and cursed by Sophie, Simon's face turned green and then white. He never imagined that Sophie, who usually seemed gentle, could have such a crazy side. "Simon, wake up. A scumbag like you still dreams of Cynthia abandoning her husband and child to come back to you?" This sentence was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Then, Simon let out an extremely angry roar and directly strangled Sophie's neck. He used all his strength, choking Sophie until her lips turned gray and her tongue stuck out. "It's all your fault. If you hadn't deliberately instigated me to torture Cynthia, how could I have done such a thing?" Just when Sophie was almost out of breath, Simon let go. Meanwhile, I had already returned to the tent while they were fighting each other. Even if they fought to the death, what did it have to do with me? That night, it rained all night. In the morning, when we came out of the tent, the ground was completely wet. Every step was in squishy mud. I lost the mood to continue camping and prepared to go back with Lucas. Not far away, about 100 meters, I saw Simon slumped under a big tree. He was soaked through, leaning weakly against the trunk. It was obvious he had been caught in the rain all night. He looked at me pitifully, trying to gain my sympathy. But I just gave him a cold glance, frowned slightly, and took Lucas's hand to walk out of the mountain. Throughout, I showed no extra expression or said any extra words. Not long after I left, intermittent, low sobbing came from behind, crying very sadly. But I didn't even turn my head. Gradually walking away until I disappeared from Simon's sight. After that day, Simon seemed to have truly given up. Knowing that I wouldn't forgive him, he didn't appear around the old house to disturb my life anymore. Just when my days were going orderly, about a week later, Simon's parents suddenly came to the old house to find me. "Cynthia, for the sake of our two families being old friends, please go and persuade Simon to accept the surgery. We know Simon has wronged you, but we hope you can see him for the sake of us two elders." From Simon's parents' explanation, I learned that after getting caught in the rain that day, Simon had contracted a serious illness. He refused surgery and spent his days lying in bed in a daze, even picking up the bad habit of alcoholism. Unable to withstand the pleas of Simon's parents, I decided to go. When I saw Simon again, he was emaciated beyond recognition. He was so weak that he couldn't sit up and could only lean on the hospital bed. As soon as I appeared, his eyes lit up. But soon, they dimmed again. "Cynthia, why did you come?" He raised his hand to cover his face. "I must look very ugly now, right? You used to say I was the most handsome, but now I don't dare to face you." I gave him a cold look. Although he was in a miserable state, I felt no sympathy. If it weren't for the fact that Simon's parents had treated me well in the past, I wouldn't have come here today. Like completing a task, I spoke directly. "Your parents found me and asked me to come. Simon, even if you die now, don't expect me to shed a single tear for you. You've already wronged me. If you want to wrong more people, then continue to wait for death." After saying this last sentence, I turned and left. Seeing Lucas holding the child waiting for me outside the hospital, my anger instantly calmed down. Seeing the child's little face slightly red from the sun, I couldn't help but feel distressed. "Why are you letting the child sunbathe? Aren't you afraid of sunburning him?" Lucas handed the child to me and smiled, saying, "The hospital said that more sun exposure is healthy." With our child's skin, how could he get sunburned so easily? Leaving with Lucas, joking and laughing. Behind me, a burning gaze stared at my back, lingering for a long time. I knew all along, but I had no intention of paying attention. Later, Lucas held a grand wedding for me. Our 3-year-old son attended as our flower boy. When he handed me the red ring box, at that moment, I felt incredibly fulfilled. The happiness I once desired was in my hands. In the corner of the banquet, there sat a thin man. He stared at me infatuatedly, with a look of both crying and laughing on his face. Not long after, he gave me a generous gift and left. From that day on, Simon disappeared from my life. I heard he went abroad and was busy handling company affairs all day.